In the forgotten hills of eastern Kentucky, where morning mist clings to valleys untouched by time, a documented case from 1834 continues to puzzle historians. Reverend Ezekiel Morrison arrived at the remote Baptist congregation of Pine Hollow with his 9-year-old twin daughters, Rebecca and Rachel. This community was so isolated that maps from that era barely acknowledged its existence. Events during their 3-day stay were recorded in the Journal of Pastor William Phillips. This document was discovered in 1987 when the old church was demolished. The journal entries describe precise, unnaturally accurate occurrences. Modern psychologists have studied these events extensively. None can explain how 2 young children possessed knowledge that defied all rational explanation. The Morrison twins did more than predict future events. They revealed secrets buried for decades. They described people they had never met. They spoke of tragedies that occurred years before their birth. Every detail they revealed proved to be absolutely verifiable. Kentucky in 1834 was a land between wilderness and civilization. Communities like Pine Hollow existed in virtual isolation within the Cumberland foothills. Established in 1818 by 3 families seeking religious freedom, Pine Hollow had grown to about 200 people by 1834. Most residents were related by blood or marriage. Their lives were governed by strict Baptist doctrine. The community centered around a modest wooden church built with timber from the surrounding hills. Pastor William Phillips maintained the only written records of births, deaths, marriages, and significant events. His meticulous nature proved crucial for documenting what happened next. Ezekiel Morrison was a familiar figure along the circuit of remote Appalachian churches. At 34, he appeared weathered and carried prematurely gray hair. He traveled on foot with his daughters, carrying a worn leather satchel containing his Bible and a journal. He had been widowed for 9 years after his wife died, giving birth to the twins during a severe winter storm. The twins, Rebecca and Rachel, were identical in appearance but different in temperament. Rebecca possessed an outgoing nature. Her smile was infectious, and she spoke with confidence. Rachel was quieter and more observant. She often began sentences her sister would finish, or answered questions directed at Rebecca. The Morrison family was known for bringing spiritual renewal to struggling congregations. Stories followed them from church to church. Backsliders returned to faith. Communities resolved conflicts. Spiritual awakenings lasted years after their departure. Some attributed this to Ezekiel's preaching. Others noticed changes often began after private conversations with the twins. The journey to Pine Hollow had been difficult. Autumn rains turned mountain paths to mud. Ezekiel carried Rachel the final 5 miles when she developed a fever. They arrived at sunset on November 15, 1834. Pastor Phillips was concluding evening prayers. Phillips wrote that his first impression was of profound weariness. Ezekiel's clothes were patched, his boots thin from travel. The girls clung to their father. Rachel was pale from fever. Rebecca's brightness was dimmed by exhaustion. Yet their eyes held an alertness that felt inappropriate for children, making Phillips uneasy. That first evening, during a meal with the Phillips family, Rebecca asked the pastor's wife about her garden. She specifically inquired if roses by the eastern fence had recovered from a blight 3 summers prior. Mrs. Phillips dropped her spoon in amazement. The blight had occurred, but she had never mentioned it outside the community. Rebecca said she had dreamed about roses while walking and knew Mrs. Phillips grew the most beautiful ones. Pastor Phillips recorded this incident that evening. It was only the first of many events that challenged the community's understanding of the natural world. The next morning was gray and cold. Pastor Phillips rose early to prepare his sermon. He found Ezekiel awake by the dying fire, his Bible open but his eyes distant. "The girls had disturbing dreams last night," Ezekiel explained. "They often dream of places we visit, but these were different." Before Phillips could respond, Rebecca appeared. "Pastor Phillips," she said, "in your church, beneath the 3rd floorboard from the altar, Something is hidden that should not be there. Rachel dreamed about it, and I dreamed why it is hidden." Phillips felt a chill. He had hidden a bottle of whiskey beneath those floorboards 3 months prior. No one knew. He had confessed this only to God in private prayers. "What did you dream?" Phillips asked, his voice unsteady. Rachel emerged from the shadows. "The bottle is brown," she said softly. "It is wrapped in a piece of cloth that was a baby's blanket. A blue blanket." Phillips sank into his chair. The cloth was indeed a remnant of a blanket that belonged to his infant son, lost 5 years earlier. He had wrapped the bottle in it as a reminder of his failures. Ezekiel watched with sympathy and weary familiarity. "It started when they were very young," he explained. "At first I thought it was childish intuition. As they grew, their insights became specific, impossible to explain. That Sunday service would be remembered by every congregant for the rest of their lives. Ezekiel's sermon was powerful but ordinary. What happened afterward defied explanation." As the congregation filed out, Rebecca approached Samuel Turner, a prosperous farmer. "Mr. Turner," she said, "the money you take from the collection is not stealing if you put it back. Papa says God forgives those who repent." Turner's face drained of color. For 6 months he had skimmed small amounts to cover debts, telling himself he would replace the money. Before Turner responded, Rachel addressed Martha Whitfield, an elderly widow. "Mrs. Whitfield, your husband did not die in a farming accident. He is still alive. That is why you hide the letters." The woman swayed. Her husband had abandoned her 15 years earlier. She fabricated his death to preserve dignity. The letters were his pleas for forgiveness from Missouri. She had never spoken of them. The twins moved through the congregation. They spoke to Dr. Hayes about patients who died due to his lack of training. They mentioned the son the Miller family kept hidden in their attic. They described secret meetings between Thomas Brett and a married woman. Each revelation was delivered with childlike innocence, without judgment. The accuracy was so precise, the congregation stood frozen in terror and awe. Rebecca's final statement would haunt Pastor Phillips. She stood before the altar. "This is sacred ground," she said, "but it has been stained. The Whitman family did not die in a house fire. They died here. Some of you know why." The silence was deafening. The wind outside stilled. The Whitman tragedy was Pine Hollow's deepest secret. In 1818, the Whitman family were prominent members. Jacob was the blacksmith and unofficial leader. Mary was known for herbal remedies. Their twin daughters, Hope and Faith, were community darlings. The official record stated they perished in a house fire. Their remains were buried with ceremony. Yet Pastor Phillips had always found the lack of detail strange. Elder Thompson, a founding member, rose slowly. "Child," he said, "you speak of things before your birth. How could you know this?" Rebecca turned to him. Faith had a birthmark on her left shoulder. Hope had one on her right ankle. Faith carried a wooden doll their father carved. Hope wore a silver locket with their mother's hair. When they died, Faith wore her blue Sunday dress. Hope was in her nightgown because she had a fever. These details, impossible for a stranger to know, sent murmurs through the older members. "The night they died," Rachel continued softly, "was not a house fire. They came here for sanctuary. Someone was hunting them. They hid behind the altar but were found." The church grew quiet. Pastor Phillips remembered whispered conversations that stopped when he entered. Meaningful glances between older members. Flowers left at an unmarked cemetery spot. Samuel Turner stood abruptly. "This is madness," he declared, though without conviction. "These children speak nonsense." But others began sharing details. Mrs. Carter whispered about bloodstains on the church floor that would not clean. Old Benjamin Foster mentioned sounds like children crying late at night. Dr. Hayes recalled finding what looked like bone fragments in the foundation mortar during repairs. If the Whitman family died in the church, If their bodies were within its foundations, then every service had taken place over their unmarked graves. Ezekiel had witnessed similar scenes elsewhere. "Mr. Morrison," Pastor Phillips asked, "how do your daughters know these things?" Ezekiel was quiet a long moment. "I ask myself that daily. Their mother claimed second sight, but this goes beyond. They dream of places unseen, speak of people unmet, know events before their birth." He looked at his daughters with love and sadness. "At first, I believed it a divine blessing. Now I wonder about the cost. They carry everyone's secrets, everyone's pain. They know things children should not." The twins moved together. "We do not choose what we see," Rebecca said, her confidence replaced by weariness. "The dreams come whether we want them or not. We see what was, what is, and what will be." Rachel nodded. "The Whitman sisters visit our dreams. They want people to know what happened. They want to be remembered properly." The church fell silent again, people grappling with concepts challenging their reality. Pastor Phillips faced a decision: dismiss the claims as fantasy, preserving stability, or pursue the truth, risking destruction of the community's foundation. That evening, unable to concentrate on prayers, Phillips searched church records. He found a hidden journal from his predecessor, Pastor Hayes. The water-stained pages revealed Hayes had been troubled by the Whitman deaths. Jacob Whitman had discovered financial impropriety among community leaders. He demanded confession and reparation. On December 20th, 1818, a heated meeting occurred. Voices were raised. Accusations of theft and corruption were made. Threats of exposure were uttered. The final entry, dated December 22nd, was chilling. "The Lord forgive us all. Jacob and his family came to the church seeking sanctuary but were followed. I heard children crying, then silence. Morning came, we found them as left. Elder Thompson and others insisted we protect the community's future. I agreed to their plan. May God have mercy on my soul." Phillips set down the journal with trembling hands. The Whitman family was murdered in the church. Community leaders conspired to cover the crime. A soft knock interrupted him. Rebecca stood in the moonlight. "Pastor Phillips," she said, "you found Pastor Hayes's journal, the one hidden behind the loose foundation stone." Phillips stared. He had found it there, guided by a draft. "How did you know?" he asked. "Faith showed me in a dream," Rebecca replied. "She said Pastor Hayes was a good man forced to do bad things. She wanted the truth known." "What do you see in these dreams?" Phillips asked carefully. "We see everything," she said simply. "Not just what happened, but why. The men who killed the Whitmans did not plan to hurt anyone. They wanted Jacob silent about his discovery." "What discovery?" Rebecca looked toward the cemetery. The money for the church did not come from donations. Some was stolen from travelers. Jacob found out when asked to make horseshoes for horses belonging to dead men. Early years had frequent reports of travelers disappearing, officially attributed to natural dangers. If Jacob discovered evidence of murder and robbery— "The church was built with blood money," Rebecca continued. "That is why faith and hope cannot rest. Their blood was spilled on cursed ground." Phillips faced a horrible truth. The church was